Phil asked Onitsuka if Blue Ribbon Sports could be the exclusive distributor for Tiger shoes across all of America, not just the West like previously agreed. But they initially said no, because they didn't think Phil's company was big or established enough to handle that, and they wanted someone with offices on the East Coast. On the spot, Phil immediately said, "But we do have offices on the East Coast." In reality, they didn't. But Onitsuka believed Phil and was impressed that Blue Ribbon seemed like a much bigger company than they'd initially realized. So they struck a deal for Blue Ribbon to be the exclusive US partner for the Tiger brand shoes, and Phil ordered 20,000 more pairs. The executive from Onitsuka told them he'd ship them to Blue Ribbon's East Coast office, which of course they didn't really have. So after the meeting, to try and raise money for these new offices, Phil sent out flyers advertising the chance for people to invest in Blue Ribbon Sports. They said it was a fast-growing shoe company looking to expand and people could buy shares. They then sat back and waited for people to invest. But nobody at all responded. It was humiliating, and also extremely worrying that nobody seemed to believe in the potential of their business, as nobody at all wanted to invest their money. The only money they did get was from the parents of one of Blue Ribbon's early employees, Bob Waddell. His parents knew the company desperately needed cash and offered to put in $8,000, which was literally their entire life savings. It drained their balance to almost zero and put them in a very difficult financial situation, but they wanted to do what they could to give the company the best chance of survival. Phil didn't want to take their money, but the banks were refusing to loan him anymore, and so he had no other real choice. On the plus side, Phil and Bowerman both loved the shoes created by Onitsuka. They respected the quality of the Japanese brand, and of course it seemed win-win for both sides, because thanks to their company Blue Ribbon Sports, Onitsuka had now become a formidable brand in the United States. So Phil understandably thought that the future of his company was with Onitsuka, but the truth is, they had some problems, and they were about to get even bigger. You see, the initial success of Blue Ribbon Sports had led to the rapid opening of new stores, which often left Phil in a risky situation where he constantly had to worry about cash flow to support the increase in stores and employees. Phil had to get more facilities, hire more staff, and order more shoes. The Cortez, for example, had quickly become one of the most popular shoes in America, and they were selling out faster than they could keep up with. So Phil repeatedly tried to have Onitsuka send the shoes faster to meet the demand, but the Japanese brand continued to send them at the same pace. It was only later that Phil found out that Onitsuka had been selling to their Japanese customers first as their priority and simply importing whatever was left over to the US. It was unfair, but there wasn't really much Phil could do. To compound the situation, Onitsuka was slow to produce the suggestions and innovations that Phil and Bowerman shared with them, and sometimes they completely ignored their suggestions, which infuriated Bowerman, who'd been working hard on new designs and improvements. So, hoping to improve the situation with their supplier and discuss renewing their contract, Phil arranged another in-person meeting with a representative from Onitsuka, a man named Kitami. But the meeting was strange. Kitami said Blue Ribbon sales were disappointing and didn't seem that interested in renewing a long-term deal with Blue Ribbon. Phil couldn't understand it. He felt his company had definitely earned the contract extension. After all, Onitsuka's success in the United States was down to Blue Ribbon Sports. They'd introduced the Tiger brand in America, and sales were growing every year. Phil even showed them a survey that revealed that 70% of American runners wore or owned one of their shoes. Not to mention that Bowerman had helped improve their shoe designs. Phil had already been a little suspicious that Onitsuka was planning to make partnerships with other distributors, and it was becoming increasingly clear that something wasn't right. So when Kitami left the room, Phil took a folder out of his briefcase. It contained a list of 18 athletic shoe distributors across the US, and a schedule of appointments to meet with them. It was now clear that Onitsuka was secretly plotting to replace Blue Ribbon and find a new distributor. From their perspective, now that they'd gained a significant foothold in the United States, thanks to Blue Ribbon's efforts, the Onitsuka executives decided that they needed to move on to more experienced distributors to expand and increase their revenue. Phil was outraged, but most of all, he was hurt. He confronted them about this and pointed out they still had a contract in place for at least another year. However, the Japanese brand then gave Phil an ultimatum. Either we buy 51% of Blue Ribbon Sports, or otherwise, we make deals with other distribution partners. Phil Knight immediately rejected their offer to buy his company. He didn't want to sell, and he couldn't believe this was happening. But Phil knew there was really only one way forward now. If Onitsuka was going to start partnering with other American distributors, then it was time for war.